And so I want to talk to you a bit today, firstly about this verse, which says this: a stingy man hurries, or woman, a stingy man or woman hurries after riches and doesn't know that poverty waits for him. So there's something about our stinginess, right? And I believe that we've all got a bit of stinginess within us. I called it the inner scab, okay? Now, I grew up in Leominster, okay? Now, I'm speaking locally, so we all know, as most of us are Herefordians, we know where Leominster is. And we didn't say you were stingy, you said you're a scab, okay? And there was the inner scab. I think we all have an inner scab within us, okay? They're just tight. They just don't want to do the nice thing. They just want to keep things for themselves. And you've got to fight that guy. You've got to kind of put him in his place. You've got to make sure that he doesn't take over and, take control. And there's something about a stingy man. He hurries after riches, so he wants to keep things for himself. But all the while, he doesn't know that poverty waits for him. That's the way to poverty. You hold on and you get less. You give away and you get more. That's bizarre, isn't it? Now, I remember as I was growing up as a kid, and I think my poor granddad, he's already got a mention in this series. But my granddad, we went away on a camping trip, and we went away kind of with a church camping trip, and we were away for, about 4 days. I was 14, my brother 12, my other brother 10. And we'd gone away. My parents had enjoyed the weekend without us, so, they were loving a weekend off. But we were there, no parents to oversee us. And so I'm going to say that showering wasn't such a priority. You're away on a camping trip. Those camping showers, they're never good anyway, are they? They're always that nasty. So you just don't know what's been in the bottom of there. And so I was kind of just, happy with, hey, it's only 4 days. I mean, a 14-year-old boy anyway, so it's not the highest of my priorities in my life. So, especially camping, it's just like, I'll be all right. Just one of those deodorant showers. One of those. I don't even know if I bother with that, to be honest. But there was something about, once you then finish the camping trip, okay, there's nothing quite like getting back and getting clean. Has anyone been in that situation? You just want to get back, get in the shower, get clean. Okay, so I'm thinking that. So we're staying at my granddad's that night. So we come back from the trip, 4 days away, probably getting on the verge of unhygienic now, just maybe. It was in August as well, so it was kind of a hot and sweaty summer. No? Yeah. Boys, lads. And anyway, so we go back, and it's like, hey, Granddad, can we take a shower? Well, I'm going to have to fire the boiler up. Isn't that what it's for? It's like hot water? No? Okay. And he wouldn't let us take a shower because it's like he didn't want to fire the boiler up. So it's just like, hey, I guess, we'll just stay stinky and go to bed like this. And then we want to, maybe eat some food, but he didn't want us to eat his cornflakes so he wouldn't have enough for the morning. So we couldn't have any, cereals. And it was like, oh, man. So, there's something of my granny. He was a lovely man, but he could be a tad stingy. And there was something about the stinginess. And have you ever had, or maybe you've been this person, or maybe you've got a friend like this, the one that always forgets his wallet. Have you got a friend like that? I remember having a few growing up, and they just, I've forgotten my wallet. Yeah, this happens to you every time. I'll text you before we go out next time as a reminder. And there's something about, maybe going out and, we're getting a lift with someone and they never offer to pay any petrol money. It's just like they always want to get a lift, but they never want to contribute. So I'm talking about, this is a bit of stinginess here. You might have someone, maybe you are this person. It's okay. Don't feel condemned this morning. There's hope for you. Maybe someone who's always kind of counting the purse strings. You split a bill and you want to pay the exact to the penny and you're there on your calculator, making sure that you don't pay anything over what you should be paying. You know these people, right? I can see some people like elbowing each other going, it's you. But there's something about, no one wants to be a stinge, do they? No one wants to be that. But yet we do. And I think that, the people of God should be the most generous in the world. Right? I really do. I believe that we as the church, we should outdo anyone for generosity. That we should be leading the way. Because if you think about, right, all of our kind of charities, our hospitals, our education system, guess where almost every single one started? By the church, by Christians. That's why you go to all these Church of England schools. That's why you go to our universities. They all have their origin within the church. That's why you go to hospitals, and it's the St. Mary's, because why? It found its origin with the church. We were the ones wanting to be generous and give the entire time and set that within our culture. Do you know, even the word charity itself, do you know what it means? It means the Christian love of one's fellow brother. So all this charitable work, all the children need, comic relief, all the great things that our country does, where it found how to do that in our society is through Christianity. It's through our faith. We taught the world to love one another. I think that's pretty awesome. I think that's really cool. And that comes from our faith. That's the heart of who we are as Christians. And there's something about us, right, that we now in our world, we don't want to stop leading the way. We want to keep raising the bar. We want to keep going and keep going further and saying, we're going to lead the way in generosity. That we as the church, we should be the most generous people in the world. Amen? Do you agree with that? But we don't always do that, do we? Sometimes there are times when we're not feeling generous. But there's no one who wants to be, labeled as stingy. That's generally, if you get called a scab, I'm thinking of my school days, don't tend to call people that now. That's not generally an encouraging term. So no one wants to be that, and yet there can be this part of us that holds back. Okay, so why is that? Here are a few reasons, I think. The first one is selfishness. We care more about ourselves. And say, for example, if it's, money's a great example, isn't it? If we're wanting, someone's asking or requiring something of us, we'd rather keep that for ourselves than give it to someone else. Why is it you say no? Why is it? It's because, actually there's something about, I want me first. And that's when it really comes down to. And then second of all, our priorities. We just got more important things to be doing with our time, with our money, with our resources. And there's something actually, that need isn't as great in our life as what else we want to do with our finance or with our resource. So there's something of not wanting to invest that because it doesn't match our priorities. And we might not think like that, and it kind of just happens subconsciously. But if you look at your decisions and why you do that, you'll see it's a priorities issue. It's just not as important to you as it should be. But the third one for this, okay, and this is really, I know there's lots of people here that are not, regular people in church, and I hope you get something out of this message today. It encourages you to be generous in your life too. But this is particularly for us to understand our faith and Christianity, is that we have an earthly mindset. Because if I showed you the impact of what you gave and how it would impact your eternity, you would do everything you can to give away as much as possible. Because imagine, right, you've got two accounts, and this one account here, okay, it lasts for 60 years. It's got your name in it. You can do whatever you want with it. So you receive that £10 and you can put it in that account. And that 60 years, it's got like a 60-year expiry date because you're not going to be able to take it with you, right? But there's this other account, and it's huge, and it's this big box because there's something about when I choose to give it into generosity, it goes and impacts my eternity. It goes from when the point I die to our next life, that everything we experience and we receive, that £10 doesn't just become £10 in that box, but it like multiplies and grows and becomes a reward that we receive because God rewards us when we give and are generous to others. When we give outside of ourselves. And it's like, if you had that £10 and you could like give it for a 60-year expiry date, or you could give where it's going to last forever. It's a no-brainer, right? But we have an earthly mindset which only thinks about today, which only thinks about tomorrow, rather than thinking about the eternity to come. But if we got an understanding of that, guys, I'm telling you, I had a revelation of this year, and it changed the way that I used my money. It changed my priorities. It changed the way that I was selfish because I said, no, do you know what? I'm going to be, even Rose and I, we talked about it. We're going to be examples in our household. We want to do all that we can to be generous with what God's given us. And so it shifted things for us. And we serve a generous God. You know, I look in the Bible and I just see generosity pouring out of who God is. Okay, so we talked about last week the feeding of the 5,000. You know, and most people have heard of this story where Jesus is there. They've been there for days. They're hungry. And there's something about that, you know, all the people and the disciples say, right, you know, we need to send these people away to go buy some food. And Jesus says, no, you feed them. So they go and figure out, okay, we've got a little lunch from this lad of 5 loaves and 2 fishes. This is all we've got, Jesus. I can't believe that little boy was the only one organized enough to bring some food out of all these thousands of people. This little lad's leading the way. But anyway, this little lad's lunchbox, he comes and brings it. And Jesus takes it and multiplies it and gives it out. And it's just this miracle happened where 5,000 men get to eat their food and get to eat some lunch. But also, it's the women and children on top of that 5,000 too, which is just an amazing miracle. But guess what happens? As we heard last week, there were 12 baskets of leftovers. So Jesus didn't provide, okay, I'm just going to provide enough so that every single one of you's full. It's like, no, I'm going to give you more than you need. And so where he came with 1 basket with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, God gave back 12 baskets of leftovers because that's his nature. If you go right through the Bible, you'll see God always does more than enough. He doesn't just do what was needed. He goes and does abundantly more because that's where generosity begins. It's when it's more than was required. And there's this great story that I want to just bring us to this morning and teach you about. And it's a story that I think even if you've not ever been to church before, you've probably heard this story because it's that world famous. It's the story of the Good Samaritan. Okay, so we're going to look at the story of the Good Samaritan, which, you know, I think is familiar to so many of us. In Luke 10, and it says in verses 25 to 35. Now, before I get into this story, the context of it was Jesus was asked, what are the greatest commandments? And he responds to the guy who's asking, who's a lawyer. He says, what do you think they are? And he lists them off: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And also to love your neighbor. And Jesus said, you're right. And the lawyer was kind of embarrassed because he's answered his own question, so he really knew the answer. And so he said, well, who's my neighbor? Tell me about that, teacher. So Jesus illustrates it with this story. And so in reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So there's been this theft, there's been this beating. This poor guy has become a victim in this circumstance, okay, where he's lay on the side of the road. He's a mess, he's bloodied, he's broken, and this priest sees him and keeps on walking. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. He saw him and he literally crossed the other side of the path. Didn't want to be near him. A Levite was someone that was a part of serving in the temple. This was a holy man. This is a man that, like a church person, you know, should do and know the right thing to do. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went on him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. These denarii, that would be like a day's wage, okay? So he gives them 2 days' wages. And he said, look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense that you may have. Okay? So for me, as I read this story, it's not only about saving someone, it's about like over-the-top generosity. Okay, so the Samaritan turns up. He's from another nation. He's a foreigner. And we're going to talk more about this, but they were very divided. They saw each other in a different way, okay, the Samaritans and the Jews. But he stopped. He saw the man, and instead of crossing over the other side, he went out of his way to go to him and where he was at. And he starts caring for his wounds. He starts bandaging him. He starts putting oil on him and wine and taking care and cleaning him up. So he gives of his own resources. He starts raiding what he's got on his donkey and starts caring for this man. So he gives something of himself. But then also he puts him on his donkey. So this Samaritan, he's now got to walk this long journey. He's got to walk so that this man can have the donkey. So this man can ride on the donkey and get to a place of safety. So again, it costs him his energy. It costs him something of himself. Then he takes him to an inn. He's got to go out of his way. It wasn't maybe the destination that he was heading to, but he changed his plans to be able to accommodate the needs of this man. He not only does that, because I'm thinking at this point, man, he's done enough. He's gotten to a place of safety, but generosity always goes further. And so he goes and he takes him to the inn and he stays with him overnight. He stays with him and nurses him through the night, nurses him back to health. That's pretty amazing. And then again, I'm thinking, wow, you've done enough here, Samaritan. You know, pat on the back, on your way, well done, thank you so much. But he says, no, I want to pay as well the bill, but also let me know any further time that this man needs to recover, and I'll pay that as well. That's the heart of generosity. It gives of its resources. It gives of its time. It goes out of its way. It comes and says, I want to do more than the minimum. I want to do the maximum. I want to give my best to you. And there's something of generosity. It will always come at sacrifice. If generosity doesn't cost you anything, I'd say you're giving, but it's not necessarily generosity. Generosity is when it comes at a price, when it costs something for you. So I just want to pull out a few things of these verses. And the way of blood. Now, that sounds kind of spooky, doesn't it? But this was the way of blood, right? This road. That was what it was known as, okay? So the road went from Jerusalem to Jericho. It was kind of a meandering road, and it was known. It was notorious for where people got beaten, bruised, robbed. So there was something about this Samaritan. He knew what to expect down this road. This place was famous for it. And what strikes me, we've all seen the films, right, where you've seen someone kind of lying on the road asking for help, and then it's an ambush, right? You've seen those films? And it's like, it's just a trap set, preying on people's mercy, preying on people's good nature. And so this is not a new tactic written into modern day films. This is something that is age old. And this could have what happened to the Samaritan. He put himself in a place of vulnerability, stopping on the side of the road. Because what if it was just a trap? What if he was going to get pounced on and caught hold of as he stopped to help? He made himself vulnerable. You know, that's what generosity does. It goes out of our way. We make ourselves vulnerable for someone else. The next thing I want to say is he saw him. He saw him. Now, the others said this as well. They saw him and they crossed the other side of the road. But he saw him and he really saw him. He connected with him. He went over to him. You know, there are people in our world all around us that we see but we don't truly see. We see and we walk past. Have you ever been into Hightown, right? And there's that person in the high-vis vest and they're coming towards you with a clipboard. And it's like, if I look into his eyes, I'm going to be captured. So I'm just going to pretend I haven't seen them, head down, just keep going. Because you think, if I open myself up, I'm in trouble. I've seen him, but I don't really want to see them. I don't want to hear what they got to say, right? And I think that there was a potential for him to do that, but he chose to really see. Or maybe you watch those adverts, right? Those charitable adverts, and so quick, grab the remote, click that, because I know that if I start watching this, my heart's going to get impacted, and I'm going to be starting to, care about this person in another place. So rather than do that, I'm going to harden my heart and click off it. Generosity says, I've got to see the person. I've got to see the need. I've got to care. I've got to soften my heart. Because we could be confronted all the time with need and difficulty and troubles. And it's so easy for us to harden ourselves to it. But I'm imploring you, church, the world needs you to open your heart, to soften your heart, to truly see them so that you can make a difference. Because if you don't see them, how are you going to reach them? How are you going to love them? If you want to care for this world, if you want to love this world, you've got to see people and where they're at and in their need. The The next one is half dead. Okay, so this is the next thing I just want to pull out of this story. This guy was laying there and he looked half dead. He looked like there was a no-hoper. Now, these two men, that came before the Samaritan, they were a priest and a Levite. Both of them had duties in the temple. And there's very strict instruction in the Old Testament about cleaning rituals and about having contact with blood. And there was something about if you were serving, you were going to a holy place, then you had to be clean. And there was something of inconvenience that these two men did not want to be involved with. These two church guys, they were going to get their hands dirty if they were going to stop with this half-dead man. Because I shouldn't be touching anything that looks half dead. I shouldn't be getting my hands bloody because I've got to go serve in the temple. I don't have time for this. I can't afford to inconvenience myself. There's something, church, if you want to be generous, you've got to get your hands dirty. You're going to have to get your hands dirty. And so there's something for all of us. If we want to grab hold of this truth, you've got to think about sometimes it's going to cost you something. Sometimes it's going to have to be you go out of your way to care for those people. And the next thing I just want to highlight to us is that this man was a Samaritan. For the average person here in the UK, that means nothing to us, right? He was just someone else. He was outside of their nation. But in the context of the time, the Jews hated the Samaritans, and the Samaritans hated the Jews. They were at war with one another. They despised one another. They looked down on one another. And there's even a point where Jesus asked at the end of the story, who was the neighbor? And he said, the one who was merciful. He says the one. He doesn't want to say the Samaritan. He will only choose to say the one who was merciful. Because he doesn't want to say the name of the Samaritan. They wouldn't even want to dirty their lips with the Samaritans. So this man probably felt that way towards the Jew that he met half dead on the side of the road. But he still took compassion on him. Over the guy who was his countryman, who was a priest, over the guy who was maybe a fellow countryman that was a Levite, this guy who was an enemy took care of this poor man because he did it to love the unlovable. He did it to love the people that are hard to love. There's something about, right, for all of us, there are people that, hey, I'd love to take care of that because they deserve it and I feel that they're worthy of it. But sometimes we'd rather choose where we're generous rather than being generous to just being someone in need, rather than them meeting our criteria, going through our filters. I think that if we look at the Good Samaritan and we look at the heart of generosity of God, it shows us that it should be for anyone, anywhere. Not just certain people that fit certain brackets. That's the heart of God for us, is to be that kind of people. So we hear the context of this being about, we've got to love our world. You've got to love your neighbor. You can't fulfill the greatest commandment to love one another without generosity. You just can't do it. There's something about, if you want to love the world, if you want to love your neighbor, you're going to have to be generous. And it's going to cost you something. It might be that sacrifice that you've got to give. But if you want to truly, like it's two greatest commandments, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor. You want to do it, you've got to be generous. So this is an important message for us, church. This is something of us to grab hold of and to understand and to practice in our lives. Because we want to be obedient to who Jesus has asked us to be. You've got to be generous. And I think what a better time to talk about this than coming towards Christmas. When our world is consumed with spending on ourselves, our own family, our own situation. I want us to think about this Christmas differently. I want us to think about this. That we can be generous with our affection, okay? So I'm going to give you 4 things now where I believe that we can be generous in these different ways in our world. So we've learned about the Good Samaritan story, but what does it mean for us? The first of all is to be generous with our affection. Now, that doesn't mean hugging everyone, okay? Because not everybody likes getting hugged. So I'm not talking about just the hugs. Do you know what? I'm talking about smiling. I'm talking about being warm with someone, about welcoming them, about smiling. These little things can make a huge difference. I can't tell. Have you ever been, sat in a restaurant and your waitress or waiter comes towards you and within 10 seconds you get an instinct to whether you are warmed by their welcome or not? Because they've chosen to be generous with their affection. They might have 10 tables to look after, but they've made the time to smile. They've made the time to ask you to see if there's anything that they can do for you. And honestly, every time I go out with Rose and we go out for lunch or breakfast or something, I comment on it because it impacts me. Even if it's just momentary, I can see that and see the difference it makes to me personally. And I think I want to be like that. I want to always offer that. Even if I'm the customer and they're the one that's serving me, that I would be generous with my affection. To truly see someone. We've always got our agenda. We've always got somewhere to be, something to do. There's always a reason not to do it, right? So I was just too busy. I've got somewhere to be. That's the same thing for the Samaritan, right? He had to be somewhere. He was on a journey, not just wandering through. He was going somewhere. And he stopped to make time. He truly saw that person. And for us, guys, we need to be generous with our affection. It costs us nothing, but it can make the difference to someone's day. It will make the difference in our cafe afterwards. When you're talking and having conversation with someone, don't just talk to the people you always talk to. Go out of your way. Truly see people. Be generous with your affection. It will make the difference. Then next, generous with our time. There's something about our time is so precious and we can give of it to others. It speaks of value. Because we're in a society now that we've got less time for one another than we've ever had. 20, 30 years ago, communities really knew each other. There was, you'd know all of your neighborhood. Now, people don't often want to go out from their doors. They lock their door and they don't often engage with people just across the road or just across the fence. There's something about being generous with our time and giving of who we are. And I was in India just recently. And we went with Dave, and we had such a fantastic time. It was amazing, and I just got to spend some time with some amazing people that are a part of our church over there. And I got talking to Zubi, and so Zubiana, she's here on the right-hand side, and so we got to spend some time with her, and she was great. And she works, she's working in banking, and she's just really kind of well-achieving, high-achieving person. I said to her, hey, what are you doing today on your Tuesday? I said, well, every Tuesday I do some teaching. I teach children English. I said, oh, what school do you do that at? Oh, no, it's not school. I got talking to some children on the street, and they're living on the street, and they go to school, but they don't teach them English. And so I saw that these children didn't know English, and I thought, maybe I could help them with that. So she started gathering some resources, and every Tuesday she goes under the archway and teaches these children on the street how to speak English. Because she cares for them. She walked past them one day, and instead of just not seeing them, where there's children all around, there's need all around in India, she truly saw them and made time for them. And said, every Tuesday I'm going to be here, and if you'll meet me here, I'll teach you English. She grabs hold of some resources. No one's paying her. No one's asking her to do this. She just wants to give of her time. She just wants to be generous. That cost her something every single week, and yet she's chosen to do it. I think that's awesome. And then the next thing that I want us to be generous with, church, is our resources. What we have on us, with us. Maybe it is that lift that we can offer. Maybe it's that money that we can give. But there's something about being generous with our resources. Again, I was talking to some of our pastors there who were serving. And guys, the church in India is just doing so amazing. So many lives changed. Just marriages transformed. People coming up to me that I've never met before saying, thank you so much for having a vision to bring a church to India. It's changed my life. It's changed my family's life. It's changed my brother's life. And it's so humbling. But it all happened through our pastors who went there, Luke and Sophie, and saying, right, we're going to start a church here. We're going to turn up in a city of 8 million people and start a church. And me and Dave got talking to them and said, hey guys, how's it going, for you financially? You guys are living off sponsorship. You're living off the generosity of others who are just saying, right, we want to support you. And they said to us, you know what? It was really tough. but about a year ago, someone got in touch anonymously through the church to say they want to give us £225 a month to be sponsored. Now, that is much beyond what I would have expected someone to be giving. And I know that that comes at a huge cost to that couple that give it. But they made a decision, and they did it anonymously as well, to say, we want to be generous. And it's costing them something, but they are reaping a reward for eternity. They are making a huge difference to those people that they may never meet in India, but are shaking our hands going, I'm so grateful, because someone chose to be generous. Someone chose not to just give the minimum, but give the maximum that they could. That's pretty awesome. And the next thing for us again here as a church, to be generous with our faith. We've got something so precious. You saw these people up here this morning talking about how Jesus has changed their life. We've all got that secret. Greater than any time you can give. Greater than any resource that we could possibly give. It's the most precious, most important thing that will change the lives of people in our city and in our county. And we've got the answer. And his name's Jesus. And so all we have to do is bring them. Bring them. You don't have to try and explain everything. You don't have to try and give them every piece of theology. You just have to say, come with me. This Christmas, be generous with your faith. Don't keep it to yourself. Be generous. That means share with everybody. Say, just come and be a part of celebrate. You know, people are more open at Christmas time in Herefordshire than any other time of the year to come into church. It is the best time to invite people. It's the best time, like Kev coming in for the first time, to get an experience of church. Guys, I'm imploring you, please don't keep this to yourself. Be generous this Christmas. Be generous with those people in your life, with your faith. Hey, I'd love you to come to church with me. It could be as simple as that. So I dare you to make this the most generous Christmas you've ever had. That's my heart for you. That's my heart for our church this Christmas time. Be the most generous you've ever been. I was thinking about this, right? We're a cashless society, yeah? I imagine now there's not many of us that have got lots of cash in our pockets. So when you walk past that person that's asking for money, sorry, don't have anything on me. It's kind of convenient sometimes, right? If we're being honest, the inner scab. I'm there. I've been there. Why don't we this Christmas, you know you're going to get asked. People, we have a huge push of it around Christmas. Why don't you go loaded up with cash? Why don't you go loaded up with pound coins? So instead of just having to, not see that person, you actually give them something. You actually be generous. That you see the opportunity we have to give this Christmas and never miss an opportunity. Imagine this Christmas, right? Every time you get asked, you never say no. That's my challenge for you this Christmas, is every time you get asked, never say no. And let's try it. Let's see what an impact that would have on our county this Christmas time as we go after being the most generous we've ever been as a church. Would that be cool? I think that would make a huge impact on so many people's lives. That's what we're here to do as a church. We're here to be a light in the darkness. We're here to be hope to the hopeless. We're here to care for those that need it and to be generous with our lives. But as we finish today, I just want to come to this, that God the Father is lavish with generosity. So as his children, so must we be. Our Father in heaven, right, he gave his one and only Son. I've got 2 sons. I've got a daughter too. And to think about parting and sacrificing my kids for someone else, it's unthinkable. But the Father in heaven, he gave his one and only Son, Jesus. This is why we have this whole caboodle of Christmas anyway. That's why we have all this celebration, because it was the most scandalous grace. We didn't deserve it, and yet still he gave his Son. He didn't do the minimum, he did the maximum. He didn't just try to get us off the hook, he gave us eternal life. He didn't just change our life here on earth so that we could know freedom, he changed it for eternity. God gave over and above, beyond the expected, because of his love for us. And I think as his children, we should reflect the Father. So if that's the image of our Father, right, that he is so generous, we as Christians should be able to see that in our lives. And those in our lives, those in our workplaces, those that are our friends should see that. Don't save the best for yourself. Give them the best that you have. Now, when any parable is told by Jesus, they're always symbolic, right? And we know in the story, who are we meant to be in the story? We're encouraged to be the Good Samaritan. Yeah? So who's the person that's lying on the side of the road? That's the question I want to ask. Who's the person lying on the side of the road? They've got a description that says this, that they are, click, stripped, abandoned, and beaten. That they're stripped, abandoned, and beaten. Who is that person? There's another person that has a description like this in the Bible, and it's Jesus. Stripped, abandoned, beaten. I want to say to you, church, that every time that you reach out and are generous to someone in your life, you're being generous to Christ. Because the symbolism of who this person is in this story is Jesus himself. And I want to show you that. I want to expand that by just showing in these verses in Matthew 25. So we could just bring up these Matthew verses. Then the king. So this is Jesus speaking, and he's speaking after we've lived our lives. And he tells this story so that we'll understand this truth. And he says, come, you are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance. And that means in heaven. The kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. What we'll get to experience in eternity. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison go to visit you? They're saying, Jesus, we never saw you in any of these scenarios, in any of these circumstances. And Jesus will reply, the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. You did it for me. Jesus is that man on the side of the road. Jesus is that one that we sometimes walk past, that we can sometimes ignore. And so I want to say to you, church, I want to finish with this. When we're generous to others, we're generous towards Jesus. When we're generous towards others, we're generous towards Jesus. This is how we build up a reward in heaven. Is we're generous towards others, we're generous towards Jesus. But the other part of it is true, which is this. When we withhold from others, we withhold from Jesus himself. So guys, don't be the one that crosses the other side of the road. Don't be the one that misses an opportunity. But let's make this Christmas season the most generous of our lives. Let's go over and above and beyond and reflect our Father's love for our city and for our county. He loved us. He was so generous for us. So let's be generous to our world. Amen. Amen.